Okay, what I decided to do tonight is to go over some musagim, concepts. In Halacha Taaruvot, we find quite a few concepts. And even though actually we're holding in the beginning of Siman Kuf Hey, which we'll review briefly, what I just want to go through quickly is what has happened till now. What have we learned so far? I'm not going to go through all the details, but through all the simanim, what was discussed in those simanim before Kuf Hey? In the very beginning, the Mechaber speaks about Isur Shenisar Beheter and often Bituloi. In other words, that's what Taaruvot is all about. Taaruvot is about mixture. There's different kinds of mixtures. They occur in different ways. There's of course quantities that are involved. All forms of ways of dealing with it. One is the famous kafela we spoke about. To taste, we're unsure about the situation. And there may be a situation where you can employ a goy, a cook, to figure this one out for us, to solve the problem. So we went through the issues that pertain to goy, including Mesiach Lefi Tumoy, Eidus by a goy. These are some of the issues that we discussed concerning that method of solving the problem of certain heter. But it is a possibility, at least according to the Mechaber. The Ramo is Machmir, we're not so sure. We can rely on it, we're not experts, but at least we know that this method, if ever necessary, we may be able to use it occasionally in figuring out whether there's a tam, because tam ki ikar, and that's a problem. Even though the isur is no longer there, we have to deal with the flavor. There's a difference between min b'minoi, there's a difference between she'eno minoi, as far as quantities. Min b'she'eno minoi is of tam, more than anything else. The difference between lach belach, yovish belach, yosh beyovish, which we really haven't discussed yet. All of that is at the very beginning of Hilchos Taaruvos, for the most part. How do you deal with the two? How much do you need? Shishim is an amount that we discussed that usually helps us deal with tam, not having a kapela or not wanting to use a kapela. 60 tends to dilute the original flavor, and even if some of it may still be there, because some flavorings are stronger than others, we say that it could be a tam kolush, and according to some, at least tam kolush would not pose a problem. There are situations where the tam is still felt, if it's dvorim charifim, for example. Dover chorif also poses a problem later on when it comes to tam pogum. Tam pogum was another concept that we discussed. Although we are machmir, we're very strict with tam. The Isser has been removed, because if we identify the Isser, it's no longer an issue of Beitul Dei. So the Isser has been removed, but we still stuck with the Tam. But then we spoke about Tam Pogum. Tam Pogum means that it's no longer tasty. Or it could have been not tasty to begin with. There's some difference between them. If something was no longer tasty, it became Pogum as a result of the mixture. There's one kind of pagima that occurs automatically after 24 hours, and that is in the egg itself, not in the food. Food could last for a while, sometimes without refrigeration. It does not spoil, not become pogum. But the keli, automatically, in most cases, the tam will remain or will become pogum after 24 hours. So this helps. In other words, even though we know that there is a problem with this pot or pan or spoon, the isur is a basar b'chalav type of an isur, or with velas and treifas. Once we identify that there is a tam pogum involved, it may help us solve the problem. So with dover charif, it can complicate the situation, we said. Things that are sharp. Even though you're dealing with pgima here, it could be that the dover charif enhances the flavoring, takes away the pgima, and then we're back to square one. So these are some of the concepts that we already discussed before. We went on to discuss also the halacha of bones, because when figuring out what constitutes 60, we got to figure out there's other things in the pot. There's liquid, the broth, I guess it's called, yeah. Other things, what actually is included. For the most part, we include almost everything. The question was just about atzamas. Atzamas is, after all, something that is stuck to the meat, which is part of the meat. We're talking about a chaticha of nevela that has bones. Different kinds of bones. There's soft bones. There's hard bones. And so that's a question of tziruf. Tziruf, whether we can use something to be mevatel it. the Isra. What can be used to be mevatel the Isra? And there are all kinds of situations of all kinds of tzirufim, I should say, that some would qualify and some would not qualify to be mitzaref, to be mevatel the tam. We have the din of bitul Isra lechatchila, which we know is a problem. You're not allowed to do that. You want to, you don't have the required amount, but you want to have it now by just pouring some more liquid into it. So that would be an issue, of course. But we said that there could be a difference between a derabanan and Isur derabanan and Isur deraisa. That was as far as bitul Isur lechatchila or bitul Isur in general. Then we went on to several simanim that are very unique, that are exceptions to the rule of bitul. There are some things that do not become batal. One of them is a birya. How would you best translate it in English? A complete creature. Yeah.
The foreleg.
Sure. There are various halachas. There's some differences. We even went on to see the difference between shekets and a regular birya. Shekets being a birya too, a fly, things like that. But the fly wasn't the issue. It was more those that have tumah. That even because we discussed birya, which is not batal afilu be'elef, we went into the halachas of birya, that if it's a birya shenisrasik, right, if it's completely cut up, disfigured, it loses its chashivus of being so. But then, of course, when we spoke about achbar, things started looking a little bit differently. Achbar means a mouse. There's different kinds of mice. The city mouse, the field mouse, whether it's nois and tam lefgam or not. So here we're dealing with the birya, but we also were dealing simultaneously with the issue of pegima in the mashke, in the liquid, having filtered out, of course, the meat. You still have the tam, but the question is if the tam is poigim or not. So that was briefly the halacha in achbar. But then there was the issue of sheretz. If maybe something is left over from a sheretz, that there was some concern, according to some, because that sheretz is metame b'ke'adoshav. In other words, there's some connection between tuma and sheretz. Sheretz being more chamer, even though it's completely disfigured. There's some concern about that in the Siman of Achbar. So the Siman of Achbar, which is interesting, the Mechaber dedicates a whole Siman just for the mouse, right? In wine or in sheikhar, other alcoholic drinks, what would happen? This happens, some restaurants have mice, in the pizza, in other foods. It could happen in the beer making plants. So I guess this used to happen when people were not careful, not clean, and the infestation. It was almost unavoidable, is that right?
In Europe, they kept
Yeah, that's right. They kept cats just for that. Yeah. Anyways, so that was birya, a unique type of birya, achbar, which poses a problem as well. The question if it's poigim or not. And then we had davar sheyesh lo matirin, not necessarily going in order. Davar sheyesh lo matirin, it's going to be mutter anyway. It's also not batal. Beitza shenov b'yontav was an example. Eventually it will be okay. So something that is davar sheyesh lo matirin, it will eventually, by itself, it's a heter. Just now it's also, it's a question of the timing. Has special halachas, or since you can just wait, then it's not batal. Then you have also a chaticha ruyel eskabed, which is like birya and davar sheyesh lo matirin, that it's not batal, it's chashuv, it's important. And these are what the common denominator of these is. It's all midirabanan. The shir of shishim is also midirabanan. That's why, because din of Torah, we have the din of tul beroiv. Roiv is basically what will be necessary to be mevatel. So Baruch Hashem, we've covered quite a few details about those halachas, and right now we're not reviewing all those simanim, but it's important to keep in mind these concepts. Because even though they're not always going to come back, but that's the gist of the halachas. Well, we're going to get into that. That's in Kuf Hey. In Kuf Hey, I haven't done Kuf Hey yet. I've just discussed and reviewed just a few of the concepts, very, very briefly. of what was covered until now. Yeah. And some of these concepts you're familiar with from Basar B'Cholov, including, for example, something that we will soon see more in depth, the difference between an Isser Be'ein, an Isser Me'atzmo, I should say, and an Isser Balua, which is going to make a difference soon also in our Siman and Kuf Hey. Whether an Isser is something Asur by itself, or it's Asur because there's something in it, a Belia, it has absorbed a Belia which is Asur. Now, of course, we've covered and discussed Hanan, which is a different issue. Does that Isur Balua make the piece Hanan or not? Okay, so that's a question as far as that piece is concerned. Nonetheless, there's still a difference. There's going to be a difference. We will see the real Makoi, a real Isur, versus just an Isur Balua. And we started Kuf Hey. And in Kuf Hey we have the din of Isur Shenofa Letocheter. Now that's, if you look at the Mechaber's wording, Isur Shenofa Letocheter, that's what we've been discussing all along. Isur Shenofa Letocheter. What is it? Why is he calling it? But what's the Chiddush over here in Kuf Hey, at the very beginning of Kuf Hey at least, is that we're talking about a different kind of mixture. It's no longer the typical mixture happening in the pot, being cooked together, or just being mixed together. Here we're talking about kavush. So the Mechaber does not, for the first time, talk about kavush in Kuf Hey. Actually, the din of kavush was right before, in Siman Kuf Dalet, because Achbar, falling into Yain or Sheikhar, posed the problem of kavush. We were not even talking about there that they were cooked together. It was just shah. For some reason, the Mechaber says, let's talk about the fact that it was shah b'soicha me'es le'es. So the beer, first of all, the wine was not pasteurized, apparently. It's not cooked. So, because we're talking about yain and sheikhar. Sheikhar, if it's beer, they do cook some of the various ingredients, the barley, the hops, right? So there is some cooking involved. But it could be vats, it could be all kinds of barrels.
So he was talking about real beer, not because the beer of the Gemara.
Well, Sheikhar in itself is an alcoholic beverage, right? It does not have to be beer. No, that's why it's called Sheikhar Medina, or the mashka of the Medina. It does not necessarily have to be beer, but it makes a difference what the mashka is, because in the case of Achbar, we want to know, and that was some of the chilukim in the Siman. Does this Achbar make this particular mashke pogum or not? So we have a tradition. The source is clear that certain things it's pogum, and it may not be pogum. So all right. So we went into Kuf Hey. Now in Kuf Hey he elaborates more about kavush. And what's kavush? Kavush means either a piece of food that was immersed in liquid for some time. Okay, either that, or it could be two pieces of food, one being aser, the other one being mutter, immersed together in some form of liquid. So, kavush could be either that the food is the isur and the liquid is the heter. It could be that the food is the heter and the liquid is the isur. Or kavush could mean, we have here a neutral liquid called water, but we have two pieces of food. One is aser and one is mutter. And they're both immersed in this liquid. And this is not a laboratory, because we're talking about immersed in liquid, We're talking about in the kitchen. We're talking about somewhere where, somehow it was left overnight, whether it was intentionally or was not intentionally, or actually deliberate pickling, which is what kavush is all about. Okay? So that's kavush. No heat is involved. No heat is involved. Nevertheless, there is some koach in the process called kavush to be mavliya and or be maflit. And or is because we hold kavush does accomplish both. Klishene, it does not necessarily, but in kavush it can accomplish both. To be mavliya and to be maflit. When do I want to know if one is mavliya and one is maflit? Well, again, one is an isser and one is a heter. So you can have, if the isser is the food, then it's maflit, the tam into the liquid. If the liquid is the isser, it's sitting in treif liquid, then it could be that this piece of meat or cheese or whatever will be boileah, the is. So the kavush can accomplish belia or plito, or both. How do you have both? Well, you have the two pieces of food immersed in the liquid. One is bolea, while the other one was maflit.
Right.
If you only had one, then it wouldn't be a problem. So that's where you can have both belia and plita through the process called kavush. Kavush is powerful. Kavush is strong. And kavush is a din midaraisa. So even though it does not appear to be cooking, and it's not cooking, how do we know it's not cooking? Because in basar b'chalav, it's considered not cooking. And the unique issue of basar b'chalav, for it to be also at least behana, which it would be. In other words, if one transgressed the issue of bishul basar b'chalav, it would also be behana. That would only be if it's a real bishul. But kavush is not a real bishul for hana purpose. So it would not be also midaraisa by basar b'chalav. But it's right, exactly. But here, the din of isra and heter in general, through the process called kavush, would render the heter also midaraisa. We're concerned about the time here. So, whether it's Yovash Letzolol.
I have a quick question, since you just compared to Israel and Heter.
Yeah.
So, if you had soaking in water,
Okay.
so that we are a kavush,
Right.
so that's not cooking.
Right.
So it's not asur.
Right.
Now, if you have sandwich, both cold, that is being eaten as an Isur Rabbanan.
Yes.
If you had meat and is the resulting meat or raisa?
No, it's not. It's
is
also
it-
not.
So it's also not.
As far as Basar B'chalav is concerned. In other words, the
So
Isser of
kavush, yeah.
Basar B'chalav is only brought about through real bishul. That's when you combine the two.
So even though kavush,
Even though they have
the
absorbed,
Isser
yeah.
is the result is the raisa. Basar b'chalav, the result be the
With
rabbanan.
the Rabbanan, right. It would be equivalent to just having the two together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Basar B'chalav.
On the one hand, Basar b'chalav is far more. Where it's still
Sure.
it's far more strict.
It's far more strict.
But then again, with respect to kibbutz, it's more lenient.
Sure. And remember, Basar B'chalav, each one is really heter by itself. Yeah. What's interesting about kavush, however, there's a whole discussion, and we went through it. I'm just going to review the main point. Kavush, as strong as it may be, it's not so simple. It does not always work for all minim. It's not so clear that it works in every kind of liquid. I'm sure if you put stuff in Coca-Cola, it will disintegrate everything. Obviously, different liquids have a different chemical reaction. There's no doubt about it. And there's a whole discussion. The Aruch HaShulchan goes into it a little bit as to, we see, even from the Mishnayos, that there is differences. Mishnah makes a chiluk. What was exactly kavush? What vegetable are we talking? Kavush would not necessarily apply to everything, but we're machmer. We're machmer by kavush. And if you were looking at halacha l'maisa, you were looking only at the Shulchan Aruch. We're not going back to the Mishnah. Today we're machmer. We're saying two things that together, we're not going to figure out the molecular composition of every one of them to figure out, does it or does it not absorb? And by the way, we do that with certain kalim to determine if something is porous or non-porous. Teflon poses a problem with being machsharet. You know what Teflon is, right? It poses a certain problem. What do you do with a frying pan? Do you need hagala, or can you do can you do hagala, or do you need libun, at least a libun kal, to put it into the oven? Depends how you use it. Do it with oil or do it with oil. Well, if it's Teflon, you're not necessarily using it with oil because you don't need oil.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. Okay?
So if you're not using it with oil, you need.
Yeah, but if you use libun, you're going to destroy it.
Right, exactly.
So that's why it becomes very difficult to be machshir, treif, or for Pesach even. But some are lenient. If you do use it occasionally, regardless, it's okay. To make a gala for. It's all a question of what is the Teflon? What does the Teflon do too? I mean, Anyway.
Use sprays, oil, the sprays that they.
Yeah, but that's so minimal. That's so minimal. Oh, you mean the spray on the Teflon? The Teflon is a form of a chemical coating, not a spray.
There's some they spray it on.
You're talking about Pam. You're talking about Pam that we spray?
Right.
Yeah, that's so minimal. That doesn't constitute oil. Yeah, that's just a little bit of a grease. It would have to be oiled for it to hagala.
Thought you said that it might shorten the time period.
That's correct. I'm going to get to that. Yeah. But right now,
What you just said was that
Right.
spray doesn't oil,
Right.
so you would still call.
yes, you would.
Even
yeah.
though you,
yeah.
so it's really you're being stricter, not lenient.
I'm being, in the case
You
of
say
Pam,
it in
I'm
a
being.
tone of voice, sound like you're being very friendly and cheerful and lenient, but the truth of the matter is you're straight.
No, I'm being strict with Pam. Yeah, what I'm saying is when we say Hagala is sufficient for a frying pan, that's only if you use real oil. But if you only use it with Pam, it's so minimal that I wouldn't say that before. I would be machmir that, sure, to be machmir that. So, in general terms, kavush is not so clear as to where it applies. We know it works. In other words, the process is a process of combining things together by having them sit together for a certain time period, which is also not clear. What is clear is it's midin Torah. It's a deraisa, but how much time? Where does that apply? That's not so clear. But we hold it applies in all the mashkim, all the liquids. It applies for the most part in all minim, right? Even though it could be that you would be able to distinguish with certain things. Where do we make a distinction? With the liquids, not with the minim. We say it applies to food, any food, to the process called kavush. But time-wise, it all depends. Kavush is something that is usually a me'es le'es, over 24-hour time. We say 24 hours does it. But that's with water, or with general neutral kinds of liquid. Neutral, I mean non-acidic. The moment you introduce sear, which is brine, or choimetz, which is some, choimetz, especially the stronger kind of choimetz, according to some, there's different kinds of choimetz, a lighter form of vinegar, or a stronger form of vinegar. So if you make that distinction, then at least the stronger type of choimetz. And sear, then the Rosh says, that's where we take it from, that it's a sufficient amount of time for it to be on the fire, for it to boil. That could be a few minutes. Whatever, if it would be on the fire and the required amount of time that it would for it to boil, then in sear is a roteach, right? It's a form of hot, it's a form of heat. And because of that, you don't need 24 hours for kavush and sear. Is that right? So that's the one distinction as far as the liquid. In the liquid, yes, if it's sear or choimetz, it may be a problem.
Would you has a high sodium content? Oh, would disintegrate everything very quickly, among other things.
We may need, it could be. We would need to be machmer with something like that if we knew that. That is the same thing as we don't know. When we don't know, we don't really have to always be machmer because we go by what the halacha says.
Right.
Unless it's equivalent to tzar.
That was my question. So would today
right.
have the content?
Right.
Does that mean for this purpose?
Yeah, the sodium content by itself is not enough.
No.
But it could be that if there's other ingredients that make it very hot and spicy, right? Yes, then the answer would be yes. Then it would be a form of tzir. That tzir really is. Different kinds of tzir. Yeah. So the question is, what happens if it was only 1 minute in this? I know that in water, the 1 minute or 5 minutes would not make a difference. It would have to be 24 hours, not even 5 minutes left. It's just so. But in tzir, the poskim write that it would be also kedei klipa if it was not the 6 minutes or whatever it takes for it to boil. The shear of tzir, therefore, kavush b'tzir would be a few minutes. Let's say 6 minutes till it starts boiling. Alaish, she'artiach alaish. If it was less than that, it would be also kedei klipa. And this is important. It's an important din because there's also similar machlokas. What happens if Isur fell into heter on top of the fire? The pot is cooking, but you took it out right away. So then there's also chiluk. It depends if this clear rishon that we're going to talk about soon, that was ala eish, was already yatzer ledus boy, but you took it out right away, or it was not yatzer ledus boy yet, which is, by the way, the easier. When something is not yatzer ledus at all, even though it's ala eish, you touch it, it's not a problem. It just started cooking. That's not a problem.
It's already,
it started in the process, the
but
beginning.
It's still cold.
It's still completely cold.
Not
So
really.
what? That's easier, by the way, I think it's, according to most, easier than a situation where you have that it's already boiling, but it just fell in for a second. And you took it out. Well, that second could be too late. In that second or two, it could be mavliya or maflit, or both. So we'll see that. So that's the concept of kavush. Now, as far as kavush being a me'es le'es, at least in water, we brought down the primigodem that if it was not rotzuf, it was not continuous, 24 hours, you took out the water and you replaced it with other water, or you took it out for a minute and then you put it back, it was not there continuously for 24 hours, then it's not asur. The kovesh has to, for the kovesh to work in water, it has to be rotzuf. With tzir, of course, you don't need all of that. I mean, we said that almost right away it would be asur at least b'chtei klipa. That's only by tzir klipa, not by water. By water, you just do hadocha, if anything. So rinse it out, and that's it. It would be okay. Very interesting. So the kovesh that would not have the koach to absorb it, to absorb whatever it is that it is absorbing. The Ramah, however, brought down a separate issue, which is interesting, which you're familiar with from Basar v'chalav, that what happens when you have a piece of food being kovesh only halfways. It's sticking out. Not everything is in the water. Remember that from Basar v'chalav?
Sure.
Then what do? So he said, that's the first opinion. Why? Because he introduces here a concept which we'll talk about later more, called piapua. Piapua means that there's a certain koach in certain ingredients, or even in heat, to spread. I guess the word would be to spread, unless you have to transfer, to spread the iser, whatever it may be, or the fat, all over, throughout the piece, throughout the food, in various means. So kovush either does that, maybe, and therefore even what's outside of the water becomes also because of piapua, or it does not. Yesh mekilin, that's the second opinion. Whatever's outside, no, you can cut it and eat it, and okay. Safek kovush is of course asur, unless it's basar b'chalav, because it's not in a term. Question is, what safek kovush means? Well, obviously safek kovush is the rice, if that's safek kovush if it's piece or not. But if it's, I think the Taz is the one that says, if we have a safek whether it's kovush or not me'es le'es, that's already the Rabbanon. The shear is a different issue, the amount of time. But whether it was kovush or not, that's safek yoraisa. Or safek kovush is asur. So again, the Ramah brings both opinions as far as the piecing out. And what's the question? The question is if kovush has the koach of piapua. Because we will see later on in Siman Kufay a lot about this piapua concept, that somehow through heat, at least through heat, and maybe even through something called Melicha, through salting, that certain ingredients like fat have the ability to transfer, travel, I should say, because of the process that they're involved in. Heat, salt, in other words, whatever it is. An inherent properties, very good. So that's why he at least suggests that this is according to the opinion that says that the piece outside of the kovush is also is because maybe kovush has the ability to transfer the iser to the rest of the piece. Or does it not? The ones who are makel say it does not. Piapua only works maybe in sli, roasting, maybe when there's some heat involved. Some heat. Heat is no heat. So we don't say kovush is that strong to take the iser that's down there below and make it travel to the top. Kovush is strong enough for whatever is in the water, but to transfer it, so that's why, and we're mako. I believe most boys are mako by a chaticha that part of it is outside the water.
So we're talking here about the kovush.
We're still talking about kovush now.
Yeah. But if this is what we wouldn't be mako, or also.
No. We'll see. Later on, we'll talk about the same scenario, and it will make a difference whether you covered the pot or you didn't cover the pot. Remember that from Basar b'chalav?
Sure.
And obviously, we're talking about that you didn't mix everything. Because once you mix everything, what's the question?
Right. Something sticking out.
Something sticking out only. Yeah. Okay. What else do we have about kavush? We have a question about kavush, if it applies to kalim or not. And which kalim? That's another thing we discussed. Kavush and kalim. How do you have kavush and kalim? Well, you have a piece of iser that is sitting in a keli over 24 hours.
Now, is that, does it make a difference if it's by sitting in a keli?
No, because either way you have a liquid. In order to produce kavush...
So we're talking about a situation where there is a liquid involved.
Yes, there has to be a liquid involved, because what you're talking about is a different scenario where you have choim, heat, and we'll talk about that next. So does kavush apply to kelim? Yes, and apparently it does. You have an iser sitting in liquid, of course. No, now the question is not about the liquid, the question is about the keli. Well, it becomes asur. the keli becomes asur. It's a machlokes. Not everybody's in agreement with that.
Is that also after 20?
Yes. Not only is that after 24 hours, even by tzir, kavush to make the keli asur because of kavush, you would need even by tzir 24 hours. Even though tzir is powerful, remember that within a few minutes, something that is in the tzir becomes asur because it's very powerful. The brine, right? The food will become asur within a few minutes. To make the keli asur, as a result of kavush, you need the full 24 hours.
Even if it were complete before that?
No.
You could have it sealed, be so powerful that it destroys.
Let's say this is very applicable when you have non-kosher wine sitting in a barrel. That's where this question comes up. It's been sitting in a barrel. What do I do? I have to be mekalef. I have to peel off a part of the wood, right? I don't need to. The whole barrel doesn't become asur because it sat there for a while. But it would have to sit there for a while, at least 24 hours. So that's where the question comes up by yain nezech too. So here too, if it came up with brine, with sear, it would still be a 24-hour issue.
Practically speaking, the barrel apart, take off part of the
Part of it, yeah.
inside,
Sure.
build it
Exactly.
back
Build it
together.
back together. Sure. Yeah. It's interesting, in Iran, before Pesach, they would take their copper kelim and make another layer of copper. You recall that?
Yes, the people
To
coming around
redo the copper inside.
Inside.
Yeah.
put it.
To put a new layer inside.
Year to year, the pots will become.
Well, it would look
and the
well.
wall would become.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So it's like the tree.
It would look new. Yeah. Anyway, so
And that would be sufficient.
well for Pesach, yeah, because it would be another layer. Yeah. Okay, so what about kavush and keli? So some say, of course, it applies. The keli would be asur. But what about food that was nichbash in a kli isur? That's a very interesting situation.
So now the food.
Is the food absorbing the isur in the keli? So we all understand that the keli becomes asur. Okay, the keli became asur. Make hagala to it now, if it's possible to make hagala. Yeah, but even if it's also kedei klipa, you still need to make hagala to the whole thing.
Is very
Right.
uncomplicated.
That's right. Very simple. Right. It's important to know that because if the keli does become asur and you eventually cooking it, you have to know how much do you connect. Is it connected the klipa or connected the whole thing? That's why it makes a difference of how much became asur. But it becomes asur the keli. What about food that was nichbash in a keli that is asur? The keli is asur now. Does the food become asur through kvi from not from the isur inside? The keli is asur. It's a treif keli.
Does kavush have the power to miss absorptions from the walls of
the keli? Yeah. So that's a machlokes. Not a real machlokes. It's a very interesting situation because the Isur V'Heta says yes. The Isur V'Heta says it's also just like the other way around. But the Shach and Taz over here, regarding that scenario, say, wait a minute, how could that ever be possible? Yes, we're going to get to that soon. Yeah. The Shach and Taz both talk about that scenario. For something to become asur from a keli through kavush, that's not possible. It's not feasible. Why? Because kavush takes 24 hours. By the time 24 hours go by, the time in the keli is pogum. Good point, right?
How does the 24 hours work? Does it mean that before 24 hours are over, no Isser was, and then as soon as 24 hours are reached, all the Isser is reached at once?
Yeah,
or is it a step-by-step process?
No, that's what it does it. In other words, it staples the Isser, 24 hours, boom. It has absorbed it.
There is suddenly.
Yeah, it's an injection of Isser that is now. You know what it's like? Perhaps. I mean, it's hard to imagine how it works, but perhaps it's very similar to Melicha. In Melicha, with salt, with blood, if you don't keep it in water for 3 days, that blood is going to be very difficult to take out through Melicha. It just won't work. The salt will not have the cough to get out to take. Time does something. Time does do something. Less than 3 days, it still may have that koach. After 3 days, it's just... And of course, the Chachamim say, I forget the exact language, the Torah was not given to us in, I forget the term, in the most precise, with very precise figures always. In other words, you can't be mechalik. The Torah is not giving us precise values. And when it comes to Bein Hashmashas, it's Asr. Right? Shabbos, we're not going to take a chance. As soon as it's after Shkia, right? We're not going to say, well, 1 minute it's still okay. Ben Hashmosh is a suffix deraisa, right? You know what Ben Hashmosh is, okay? So we're not going to take a chance. We don't take a chance. First of all, it's a suffix Ben Hashmosh. Second of all, is your clock that perfect, that accurate? Do you know that there's a difference between the zip codes here, as far as when Shabbos is, when Nates? Depending on, there can be a difference even between a few blocks from each other because of the height. Here we're about 200 feet above sea level. If you go down a few blocks, you're 225 feet above sea level. If you go closer to Fairfax, you're lower. All of this makes a difference. It's 30 seconds of a difference. You see what I mean? Or up to a minute. But you're not going to see that in most calendars that figure out this Zmanim. You're going to see Los Angeles as a city. But is it true? No way. You know about that.
Oh, yes.
The city of Los Angeles? The city of Los Angeles is big. You know that LA County is half the size of Israel?
Even if you go by zip code.
LA County. That's a county. So even the zip code, you have the Hollywood Hills. It's different. It's a different time. So we don't have the shiurim, when it comes to certain shiurim, exactly precise. We just make it asr, and that's it. And that is why, remember we spoke about an interesting question, that with some of these halachas, where we're machmir, why don't we just give it to a kafela? Remember that question? Why don't we just give it to a kafela? There are many, many times that a kafela would be able to help us, but we don't even suggest that. Why? Because a kafela would not always be able to help either. There's sometimes there's more tam, sometimes there's less tam. For example, remember the case where you have a piece of Isser, fell into a pot, then you took it out, it fell into another pot. Well, maybe it released all the time here. No, on that one you need 60 against it again.
Right.
We don't know how much it released. So we're machmir. We're not going to get into the minute details of trying to figure out the exact shear. The Torah doesn't do that. The Torah just tells you, listen, there's a chance, at least time, you don't want to take a chance, therefore 60 times. You need 60, that's it. Forget about the kefela and that.
But when you fill the same pot twice over.
Right, the same pot, right. So sometimes we just, kefela doesn't help. We don't know how much, we're just machmir. So getting back to the question of me'is le'is, I mean, what happens if it's 5 minutes before the me'is le'is? The Chachamim said it's not asr. That's not covered. It does not have the koach. Maybe there's a gradual. Of course it's gradual. It has to be gradual. But it's not enough. It's not strong enough to have absorbed the entirety.
In other words, it's halachically insignificant.
What do you mean by insignificant?
In other words, it doesn't weigh in terms of halacha of being.
Right.
Whereas, perhaps in reality, if you have a very fine instrument to measure exactly how much is
Sure.
released over time.
Or is it the halacha determines the...
Yes. In many cases it is. Because, for example, with bugs that are microscopic, no problem.
Again,
Why?
No problem
Why?
But no problem with respect to halacha. If they transfer disease, even though...
Okay, that's something else.
Right,
So
it doesn't determine reality, it determines halachic reality.
Yeah, doesn't turn into
The
halakha.
coverage might
Now,
be
it's
halacha
not
determines
because we cannot see them, because they are not also to begin with. That's a big difference. It's not because we can't. Well, if you can't, maybe you can somehow. No, it's not because. If you can't, then that's not asr. That's not what the Torah had in mind to make asr. That wouldn't pose a problem, at least.
If they're not present,
It doesn't
it
mean
means
they're
that halachically
Yeah.
it poses a problem.
One of the things that are very interesting, I'd like to look into it a little bit more, is lice on Shabbos. Killing a lice.
Like, you're allowed to, no?
Yeah. I can show you. You know what an electron microscope is? You may know. Oh, maybe. There's microscopes and there's electron microscopes, which are fascinating. Because the ones that are not electron, they have a limit to how much you can magnify and how much you can see. Okay, you can pretty much magnify. But if you want to see cell structures, you want to see really, really small things, only through electron microscope. And I can show you a picture from an electron microscope of a lice, and you can see them slice. The nails, they look like hooks. Hooks, real big hooks. And that's what it uses to hold on to the hair. You see incredible design. You see all the features. Nevertheless, there's a different halacha legabe lice than legabe other insects on Shabbos. It has nothing to do with being small, by the way.
Right.
It's not so much the size. It's just the way they are formed. Incredible. And what they're made out of. What is... as far as the blood is concerned. Incredible. But you see a whole creature. But halacha is different. Yeah. Anyway, let's go on. Yeah. I just saw an incredible thing. The Germans in Machshamam, they were so yekish that they kept reports, and all these reports and files are being made public today. They even have some reports on how many lies they found on someone and how big the lies were. That's the kind of records. So somebody asked, why did they care if they're going to kill this guy anyway? They just wanted to show how good they were doing a successful job in record keeping. And it's all written. Can you believe that? Yeah. Okay, you asked about what kind of kelim. That's also a good question. So we said it applies to the keli itself as far as kovush, but does it apply to any kind? The Isur Beheta says it doesn't apply to metal. For something. He says metal somehow does not have any effect on metal. Kovush does not absorb in the metal or have pleatus from them. Premier Gadol wants to be machmer, and I think the Aruch HaShulchan is not mechalik at all between the kelim, material-wise. But what's interesting is about glass. There are Achronim who are makel in glass. Glass being not a problem does not pose a problem. And even though you will find that the Ramah in Hilchos Pesach is machmer in glass and clay cheres, but that's because of the chumrah of Dinei Pesach only. It does not mean that this same chumrah of Pesach should apply by kovush. So glass, according to some, is a non-porous material. It will not absorb at all. If you hold it like cheres, then that's the problem. But if you hold it like the Sephardim do, you just rinse out your glasses and have it for Pesach.
Would that apply to grills or just?
No, just glass. Glazed materials, you're still going to have the cheres with a layer of glaze. It's not going to be the same. Okay, so that's the only thing about kelim. The Aruch HaShulchan is not mechalek. He doesn't say anything between kovush is kovush. So if you say kovush and kelim, it would be the keli too. It would be machmer. But Isur Beheta says it wasn't applied to metal. Mikvaot says it should be machmer in that. But glass appears to be that you could be that the kovush in the keli would not be a problem, or from the keli to the food. That was approximately the halachas kovush. Siman Kufhei goes on to describe various other concepts, and we'll go through them real quickly. We have kli rishon. For those of you who learned Hilchos Shabbos, you're familiar with what a kli rishon is and what a kli sheni and what a kli shlishi is. Kli rishon is usually a description of the pot being on the fire, but it could also be the pot that was once upon a time on the fire that is no longer on the fire, but it's still hot. And we hold, whether it's Shabbos or in Hilchos Taaruvot, that kli rishon, which is still hot, yatsu means at least yatsu ladesboy, 113 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever, or more, depending how you hold. So even though it's removed from the fire, it still has the din of kli rishon. And kli rishon means that it's mevashal if it's hot. Right? Except for Rabbeinu Tam is the only one that says that it's not on the fire, it's no longer mevashal. But we hold that kli rishon, even if you remove it from the fire, it's mevashal. Obviously, if it cooled off, or if it's not hot enough, even if it's on the fire, it will not be awesome. Just because it's a kli rishon on the fire, if it's not hot, it's not hot. All you need is a dacha. The question is, what if it's hot but it's not on the fire? So we hold it's still called a kli rishon. You have to be careful on Shabbos too from adding stuff to a thing, or whatever applies to kli rishon. So that's the question, or that's the halacha in the very beginning of Kufhei regarding kli rishon, that yatzer, that this choim, that this heat is mevashel, and since it's mevashel, it's oiser kuloi. That's all we have to know about kli rishon. It's oiser kuloi. It's not just a blia, a small blia, klipa, or whatever. It's everything. Either it's everything or it's nothing. In this case, it's everything. The next step down from kli rishon is irui. Even though you could say the next step down is rishon sheina yatzoletzboy. But we said if it's not yatzoletzboy, it's not a problem. According to most, it shouldn't be a problem. The next step down would be irui. What's irui? Irui is pouring hot boiling water. Hot boiling water, right, into something else. So you're pouring. What does pouring do? Well, as it's coming down, it's cooling off. It's not the same thing. It's not sitting in the keli where it was cooked. It's traveling in the air. It's a different kind of phenomena. That's called irui. Machlokes, Rashbam, Rabbeinu Tam. What's the din of irui? So The Rashbam is the one that holds that it's more like a klisheni, which we'll talk about next. It's not a clear reason anymore. Rabbi Tam holds that it's mevashel. In other words, it's almost like the clear reason. Why say almost? Because I think the way the Shach explains Rabbi Tam is that even according to Rabbi Tam, that we say it's mevashel, it's only mevashel kedei klipa, and that's how we hold, by the way. Irui oiser kedei klipa, just a small layer. Good to know. But Shabbos, it's a problem. What do I care if it's a klipa or not? If it's bishul, it's bishul, right? So you can't do irui on Shabbos on something that may become a bishul, unless it's already cooked, because of a bishul achar bishul. But if it's baked, you're going to have a problem with bishul achar afiyah. So you have to be careful with irui on Shabbos. Oh, it's only a klipa. Yeah, but a klipa is a problem. A klipa is a problem here, but you can remove the klipa. But on Shabbos, it's going to be a problem, a real problem. So you want to be careful with irui on Shabbos. So according to the Rashbam, even though he holds it's like a klisheni, I think he does hold that it's mavliya or maflet. A klisheni has that koyach, not to do both, but to do one or the other. Yes, this is according to the Rashbam. A klisheni has the ability to be mavliya or maflet. Rabbi Tam holds it's mevashel, but as far as what we need to know from this bishul, whether it's Rabbi Tam or not, is that it's only going to be a klipa anyway. Because other than that, I don't think we're more machmer than that.
You would not be able to take off it either.
No, Shabbos is not a problem. Or even to take it off, if there was an Isser,
Yeah.
well, that's boira,
Right.
right? There would be a problem with boira if there was an Isser, yeah. It all depends on how it became Asr. You can always eat that which is mutter. It depends. Yeah, but here, even though Iru is not mentioned, that is really the next step down.
Now I recall that actually by both sides, as far as say it's the
Yeah, we're not machmer. A lot of people are not machmer in bones in the fish. That's derech achila.
respect.
Maybe you want to make it filter fish instead, and that's the whole thing. So you don't have the
difficult.
bones. You don't have to worry about swallowing also. Yeah.
I believe they grind very hard to digest.
Is that right? They grind it with the bones, yeah.
But in our case here,
Right.
Would that then not also apply then in some circumstances? Like the bone?
Well,
Bones
yeah,
also
the peel of an orange is derech achila. You're removing it to get to the food. Yeah.
So the same thing when
Not really. When something is no good, if something is rotten, you're allowed to cut. You cut away the good part. You don't throw. You try to be, even though it's not the same boiler. It's not the same kind of boiler. You just removing that which is in the way. It's different than actually looking at boiler. Anyway, it would all depend. Sometimes boiler applies, some doesn't apply. Even in the derech achila, you have to be careful to do it the best way possible. The best way possible.
Take out the spider from the soup.
With a level biblic way, exactly, yeah. All right, the next step down from Irui was cliche. In that, of course, we have machlokes in the words of the Mechaber. Mechaber says, "Klishena enu mevashel, v'yesh omer shegam ken enu mafre v'lo mavliya, v'yesh omer b'kom makom u'mafrit u'mavliya ve'oise kedei klipa, v'roi lochush lizo b'dov lechatchila." In Shabbos, that's not a problem as much as in Isser v'heter. The Mechaber says yesh lochush. Well, obviously, we're talking about Taaruvot here. Like Shabbos, it's either mevashel, not mevashel. Once you determine we hold klishena not mevashel, okay, you can have your tea with your tea bag in a klishlishi. If you hold that it's a kalei bishul problem, so it's not klishe, it's a klishlishi. But with other things that are not kalei bishul, you wouldn't have a problem with the klisheni. For the most part, klisheni is a klisheni. That's it, unless you want to be machmir. But here, Mechaber himself, bringing down all the shita, says yesh lechatchila, yesh lizar bedover. So that's klisheni. The Taz, interesting, he holds, the Taz brings down that a kli rishon that was emptied of its contents is like a klisheni now.
Of its contents?
Yes, a kli rishon that was emptied of its contents has a din of a klisheni. Yeah, it's not balei and not toilet. The shach is machmer. So machlok is the shach and the Taz. But he holds that it's more like a klisheni. Now, why? What does this have to do with anything? Why should it? No. Why should it make a difference? Because one of our the next concept after klisheni is dover gush. So by klisheni we hold that worst comes to worst, it's mavliya or mafrit, but it doesn't do both at the same time. In other words, it doesn't have the koyach like by kovush. Klisheni does either one or the other or nothing. Even though some do say that it's mevash and mamish, we don't hold like that. But dover gush, which is a salad, many hold that it retains heat because of what it is. It's potato. Potato's hot. A hot potato. Yeah. You know, if you ever tried it out, it's really hot. You take it out, the liquid cools down within 30 seconds even. It's already cool. You can put it into your mouth. The hot potato is going to be a hot potato for a while. It's interesting. Some say just the opposite. That the dover, I think the Torah's hot is really Ramah. No, the noisel is hot. It retains heat better than the solid. Okay, I guess I don't know why they have a machlokes in the tziyus, but you have that kind of a machlokes. But we hold a dover gush is more chomer. Dover gush is something solid that still retains its heat, and you have to be more careful with it. Now, where could it be and make it? You know where you can come across a dover gush problem? You have a piece of meat that is a dover gush, and you have a Melicha knife, and you cut it. You cut the meat, it's sitting on the table, on the plate. So it's no longer in the Kli Rishon, but it's a dover gush. And you cut it with a Melicha knife. Now here, even those who hold that the dover gush is not like the Kli anymore, it's already like a Kli Sheni, they would agree that the knife would become treif. Because of Duchka de Sakina. Because you have a combination, both, it's not only that, you have a combination of the heat of the Kli Sheni at least, of the dover gush, plus the Duchka de Sakina, right? Cutting it with the knife. The sharpness of the knife, the weight of the knife. But wait a minute, why doesn't the meat become Basar? The meat does not have enough heat to take out a plita from the knife. To absorb into the knife, yes. You follow me? To absorb into the knife, yes. The combination of dukkha, the sakin, and the heat. But the other way around, to remove the sakin, that it's not hot enough for that. Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, assuming that the knife was sure, you're 100% right. Yeah. Then we had the Tall Govar, after Dover Gush. So, Dover Gush, you have to be more machmir, even though it's a klisheni. It's a Dover Gush. The next company was the Tall Govar. The Tall Govar is where you have something at the bottom, has more koach than something on top. So the Tall Govar, you have something in the bottom that's hot and something that's cold on top. The one at the bottom will be stronger than the one on top. This is important for Isur and Heter. It could make the one that's on top completely usher, depending on the circumstances. Right? That's where the Mechaber goes on to say later on the Nofal Isur Cham Letoich Heter Cham Rishon, or Afilu Isur Tzoinen Letoich Heter Cham. Right? Because if they're falling one on top of the other, the whole thing is also because Tatar Govar. That's the din of Tatar Govar. Bottom has more koch than the one on top. There's a question that we discussed as to quantities. Does that make a difference of quantities? I mean, after all, if you have a lot of cold coming down on a little bit of hot, it's not going to be the same. And really, in the Maisa, we're not machmer in that. There may be just a little bit of a blia, nevertheless, but it's going to make a big difference. And this makes a difference in Shabbos too. What should you do? You have a half a glass of tea, half a cup of tea left. It cooled off, and you add more hot water to it. Well, Tatar Govar, a little bit of hot water that comes down is not going to heat up the cold tea. You're not allowed to heat up cold tea, whether you're Ashkenaz or Sephardi if it's completely cold. If you're an Ashkenaz and it's still a little warm, no problem. If you're a Sephardi and it's a little warm, it is still a problem. It has to be hot, otherwise you can't warm and reheat it. Yesh bishul achabishul belach. It could be at least, it's cooled off completely. So what if you have a little bit left? You're pouring down irui. You're going to cook up. But if you have enough cold, then the little bit of hot you add is problem, right? So you have that in Shabbos too. So quantities apparently sometimes can make a difference, even though it doesn't appear to differentiate here about quantities. The Pri Megadim gets into it a little bit that if it's a lot, then obviously it's going to make a difference.
What you just said,
right?
Hot water being added to a glass that is half of the glass that has cooled it down.
Right.
When the hot, whatever small area before it spreads,
okay,
that small area is boil. Now, granted, within a few seconds, it's going to spread all across the whole quantity.
No.
And it's going to cool down to an average temperature.
Yeah, but
when it hits lahatchila, those few drops that it hits when it first comes down, we
don't look at it that way. We look at the whole thing as a mass of water, as a group of water, a body of water. But where you have a point is when you have droplets left in a glass that was not cleansed,
so that's a question.
Not dried. Yeah. That some people are
It's
machmir.
not dry yet.
Some people are machmir. You have to make sure the glass is dry.
Because they have, if you drop
That's all you have. But when you have a body of water, it's the body of water that is stronger, or can be stronger than what's coming down in it. So that's the din of Tatar Gover. The top coming down, if the top one is hot, the bottom one is cold, you would have the most klipa. That's the din of Tatar. The din of Tatar Gover being that the heter is at the bottom causes still a klipa to be asr. Right, right. So it's all machlokes, but that's how we hold. That at least it causes a klipa.
All right.
But what we're concerned here is, does the whole thing become asr or not? If the bottom one is the one that's asr. Okay? The Ramah introduces another situation where you don't have one on top of the other. What if they're next to each other? Next to each other, some are machmir, or mekel. They're only a klipa. In Basar b'chalav we're more machmir. Depends if it's fat. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that maybe on Thursday, a little bit more. And also some are mechalek if the Isser is the one that's hot. If the Isser is the one that's hot, then the whole thing becomes. If the heter is the one that's hot, then it's either mutter or just also b'kdei kli. In Basar b'chalav, of course, we're machmir. You know, the one that is hot is also kdei klipa. The one that's cold is also kuloi. Was a chiluk over there in Basar b'chalav. So that's mentioned in the Ramah. That's already not in the Mechaber. The scenario of Isser, that two things are next to each other. Right? Iminichum zetzel zeh, he says. Mishneim chamim, from chom kli rishon, and everything is awesome. But both of them are hot. One is cold, ahet tzorich klipa, the mokom shenoga. Okay? So that's as far as sitting next to each other. What about the din of Tatar Gover in Kalim? That's a very interesting halacha. Also the Ramah brings it down here. Isu shenichu bekli heter o lehefech. Amina begam ken din Tatar Gover. Kemo bebeis chatichos. Right? So there is a din of Tatar Gover by Kalim too. It's a machlokes whether there is or not. So even according to the one that does say there's Tatar Gover in the Keli being hot, or in the food being hot, there's going to be some klipa or something. And it was the din of the Tatar Gover, regardless of which one is hot. Something is going to happen. Either it's going to make the whole thing asr, or it's going to make a klipa on the top asr. That's when we mentioned the Chavaz Das and Rabbi Kiva Eger, that what becomes asr is only the part that touched the keli. So if you have a keli sitting on hot food, a spoon, or whatever, any keli, even though the food is hot, so it's a real Tatar Gover, what's going to become asr is only the spot. That's the difference between a keli versus food in Tatar Gover. For some reason, only that part of the keli that was touching will become asr. Or the other way around, only the part of the asr, the isr,
only spot with a hot Israeli.
That's what we would measure against. Or only that part of will become asr. Either way. In other words, by a keli it is different than by food. We wouldn't consider the whole keli. And we did say, I believe, that by keli, and we're going to see that later on too, it would have to be that it's asr completely, it wasn't just a bliya. We'll talk about that later on. There is a difference between if something has a blias, as we said, versus something is asr completely, regarding the transfer of the tam. But that we'll see later on. That he discusses later on in a separate sieve. We spoke about nitzuk towards the end of the last sieve. Is nitzuk chibur or not? You have to be mach. You have to be careful, even though we're mekel. That is when you're pouring liquid into liquid, and you have the stream connecting the two, or not. And in Ilchas Tumah, it's an issue. In other words, there is a discussion about it. Tumah and Tahara.
It's the question of the pot above becomes because of
the one in the bottom, especially
the
bottom, especially the one on the bottom being hot. In the case of where there's heat, like the case of the Ramah, where you're pouring into
a pot on the fire
of chaylev,
would be true
right?
there's a candle.
Of a lid on the pot.
What is that? What is that?
Lid on a pot.
On the pot?
When you put on a pot.
But that's
a separate. That's
No,
steam.
but it's-
Yeah,
In other words,
No,
here
with it.
right. No, I'm talking about the case of the Ramah. Is osularus mikli sheish bo shuman kosher lener doilek sheish bo chaylev.
yeah, it's a candle.
Right? The candle of chaylev. So it's a continuous. So even though we're makel, it's also to do it, but we're b'di'evet ein lochush. So that's the din of nitzach chibur. Is it nitzach chibur or not? We hold that it's not. Later on in Kuf Hey, we will see about Melicha Kiroteach. There's going to be several seifim that discuss about another method of heat that involves salt. Is roteach enough, and how much does it cause the food to be aser as a result of that? We're going to talk a little bit about piapua again, because piapua will make a difference if something is shaman or not. I mean, it's fatty or not. Because sometimes something could be only aser because it's fatty. Had it not been fatty, it would not make a difference. And that will be true in the case of tzli. Tzli, when we talk about tzli, we're talking about something that is baked in the oven, something that has heat without liquid. There's obviously some liquid in the food, but not enough to make the whole thing aser. Only kedei netila. We're gonna see a new concept called kedei netila versus kedei klipa. Kedei netila is bigger, but it's a real piece has to be not like kedei klipa. But that involves tzli. And that also makes a difference if there is shuman, if there's fat or not. Because once you choose fat, it could really make it could make a big difference, whether something becomes completely asur or not. And of course, the last one is isur machmas atzmoy versus the blia. That will also make a difference. If asur in itself, or it's only asur because it has a blia in it. How far can that blia go? That's the question. The blia can only go so far. So Mitzvah Hashem will discuss this a little bit more Thursday.